I'm Hertz Tribeca Trade Group, and this is your end of day market recap for Thursday, the 21st, one official day before the Santa Claus rally. Yes, I was joking around about this earlier, and I had a whole bunch of people tell me, well, the Santa Claus rally doesn't start till tomorrow. Yes, I know that. It is the last 5 trading days of the month and the first 2 trading days of next year. Yes, so I'm fully aware of that. The point that I was trying to make was that there's a lot of eyes, it seems like. There's a lot of Twitter or X that is focusing on that Santa Claus rally. So that's all fine and good. It's important to pay attention to seasonality because it certainly has worked very well this year. So let's get to today's price action. By the way, if you want to see a glimpse of Tribeca Trade Group and what we do, you could put your email address in here and you could receive our free midday report and end of day report. You can see what positions I'm holding and as well as like setups that I'm watching for the day. Themes of the day, I try to basically send the email that I send out midday. I try to make sure like that you can get through it and read through it within like a matter of 30 seconds to a minute and kind of get the idea of what's going on for the day. So let me get to the price action for the day. You can see a lot of green on the day. So nice afternoon move this morning, just to kind of give you a summary in case you weren't trading for the day. But we had a nice little move into the open today. There was some economics this morning, and the market moved on that, right? And then the open, or the first 5 minutes was the high of the day until about the afternoon. So you had to really kind of be patient with this market today. As always, patience really helps a lot in trading, and you just kind of had to wait till some setups kind of came to you. So let me review that for you quickly, and I'll start with kind of just where we were. Here was, of course, yesterday's sell-off. We closed on the absolute lows, grinded up in the pre-market. Here's what I was referring to, and this actually 1020 was the high, but then we kind of went down and just explored a little bit of a lower area here, and really the 1 hour chart kind of came into play for me today. Noticing where we rallied at the highs of today was right at the top of value. I thought it was 4790. For some reason I had a different number in my head, but 4790 was the barrier, and sometimes that's the first or the second attempt looked like it was a failure. But also note why I have the 200 period moving average, which we discussed in yesterday's video. And notice how that we kind of came down into there. I was discussing the 80% rule and about how I don't play that if we have support or like a moving average. Again, I use the moving averages in conjunction with the value areas, so volume at price, to help me kind of give me some signals for the day, and sometimes when not to take a trade is sometimes best. But that worked really well, right? This 200 paired moving average on the 1 hour chart, which again is where I find some short-term signals, right? So even on the lows of the day, we came in and we tested that again. Right. So I know some people like anchored VWAP and so forth. The value areas give you volume at price. And then, of course, we just look at the regular moving averages, and those give you enough, certainly enough areas of support, resistance, and knowing where there are crucial support and resistance areas. So 4790. So I view that as a positive that we got back above here on the afternoon attempt. A nice rally at the end of the day. The Qs very similarly had some issue, and I went long the Qs a little bit after the open, after we kind of settled in, and kind of came in right once we recouped this 406.35, and then I kind of just had to sit with the trade. And same thing, notice that price kind of came into this and found support also on the 5 minute chart, which gives you the value area for the day. I almost got stopped out of that trade. So again, it's fun to make predictions and all that type of things on Twitter, but really, if I'm going to try a trade, based on what I think and my instincts and so forth, I'm always going to have levels where that trade is going to work, or where it's going to confirm what my thoughts are. or whether it's where it's not. And again, trading is about being confident, right? And being confident with what you're doing, and being confident in your system, right? Not so much about predictions, which I see a lot of people on X do, but that's another story. Soft predictions, I call them. But in any event, really nice save here, and a close back in here. So again, that's good. That's what we kind of wanted to see for the day. So there's not much to really dislike about that. For market bulls, IWM, which was a different looking picture, by the way, was basically stayed above the value area differently than the S&P and the Qs, which the IWM has been acting differently all year long. It has been just acting differently than the Qs and S&P. So again, same thing. This was above value for the day. Now it did come in and test in here around 1 o'clock, and then a nice end of day ramp. Right. And then also notice, so again, having alert set, and we talked about that. I was joking around in the trading room today, posting a couple of funny messages saying, small caps, you can do it, because they kind of just were hanging out right around the bottom of value. So really a nice end of day ramp. Certainly helped with the market. Another observation was that breadth, you could see our indicator down here, which measures breadth using advanced decline plus volume. And you could see that it opened very strong. We almost went negative for the day. So it was almost. So there's nothing, there's no like victory lap to say about today, because it could have very easily went the other way, right? And again, that's why you have levels and a trading system to go, because look at what Brett did as we were around. Let me just focus in on this just for a second. Right. Notice how it luckily stayed in there. Right. Again, I've seen it flip before. Right. Here's what Brett did yesterday. Right. If we look at what how that unfolded, chop, 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 and then it flipped and went south there in the afternoon. So this, kind of, I would say, very nice to see that hold in there, and it never went negative on the day. All right, so that provided a little bit of clues. Next, I'm just going to go through a bunch of areas, and what I thought was also pretty positive, and I think I mentioned this at the end of the day, was just what Micron did on earnings. Talk about a tough day to report earnings. So Micron rallied, and it really kind of helped out the semiconductors. So again, before I kind of go into the single stock charts, I'm just going to pause here for a second. I unwound some positions because that's exactly what my trading system told me to do yesterday, right, on the break of the value area. But I kept on positions that I really liked yesterday, right? So this was my clue to say, hey, we're not holding support, get out of some positions, which I did. I unwound a few positions yesterday, right? And then what's nice about today is was in a much more comfortable position to basically say, to kind of watch what was going to be the relative strength, what stood out to me. So I'll go through some of these names that stood out to me. So I'm going to start with a couple new names, which I thought were interesting. The first one I'm going to talk about is ACN. And I know sometimes I find these high price stocks, but the high price stocks are high price stocks for a reason. It's because they are showing market leadership. ACN had earnings yesterday, and look at it shake off the earnings, or reverse. I like when names do this. When names, they initially go lower, they kind of take out some, they find demand at previous version point of controls, which are down in here, and look at this thing reverse and go higher. So once I kind of see this on the 1 hour chart or have an alert set, then I begin to kind of look at the longer term trend here. Yes, this has made a nice move from the lows, but you could see that this may not be the end of the move. All right. And there is also what's interesting is when you look at the daily chart, it's not really that extended from the value area, right? It's just starting to make that move. And if you begin to kind of zoom out, right, you could see that we're nowhere near the highs of where we were. And 364 is a place that I think that we're going to in Accenture, which I view as a quality consulting name. All right. So that's ACN. Another one that you haven't heard me talk about, but I had an alert set up this one, right? Again, so setting alerts on names that you may not be interested because they're choppy, right? They're in consolidation. Remember, this is a semiconductor that had a really big run, and sometimes after a big run, we'd like to see this consolidation, right? It looks like this might be ready for the next leg higher and out to new highs. What I like about names that are breaking out to new highs is they have no resistance, right? There's no overhead supply, right? So as long as this stays above the 66.77, then you can be, in my opinion, you can be long this name. And 66.77, I did go long this name today, and I'll give a little bit more tolerance, probably right around to $65, right? And by the way, everything that I'm talking about is for information purposes only. As I usually mention, you could read the full risk disclaimer right there. So there's a couple of new names. In terms of other names that I thought, stood up pretty well, was the semiconductors. Remember the semiconductors, and look at this break yesterday. That's not easy, right? But notice how it's back above the 5-period moving average, right? And that's important, right? And that's something that I didn't mention when I went through the index rebalance, the index review. But notice how the price action is back above the 5-period moving average as well here. So trends kind of stay or remain intact in the indices, which is what I look for first, right? To see what the indices are telling me, right? If the trend is intact there, right? Notice also that overbought level, we're still kind of in over 70. We're back to a little bit of an overbought area, but not extreme overbought, which is what we were yesterday, right? So the semiconductors, I already mentioned CAMT, but I thought AMD did well today, right? AMD tried a couple times to break through this value area for the day. Once, twice, and then 3 times was the charm. It will have to get through yesterday, a VPOC from a couple days ago, but overall, trend looks pretty good in AMD, right? That's also staying above the 5-period moving average. I was watching Broadcom today too. What didn't have any major momentum, but this is also, right, really high, tight consolidation up here in Broadcom. So no position for me in this one, but I do have a position, sorry, in my longer term account, my TTG trend portfolio, but don't have anything on in my trading account. ESTC, right? So this is Elastic, right? This is a name that I actually got stopped out in yesterday because it broke back below the 5-period moving average, but that's not a big problem. I can get back involved in this one. What I would be watching tomorrow is if it can stay above this 113.34, right? So a lot of these names where the consolidation was a little bit tight, sometimes they will have this move down just to shake everybody out, like myself. That's fine, right? 113.34. Right, is a level that I'm watching and happy to get back involved in this one tomorrow, because I didn't want to load the boat in names because we do have the PCE deflator tomorrow. And that'll be something to watch for tomorrow. CrowdStrike, also the price action, hasn't really pulled back too much, but even the slightest little pullback, and notice buyers came back into this and back above the 5-period moving average. I am still holding on to this one. Another name that I see a lot of people talking about, which is a name that's in a downtrend, but that had good performance today, was SE, which was up 8% today. So maybe it can, one thing that if you really like this name, because I see a lot of people talk about SE, you could be long versus 35.72. Now, again, you still have to take this name off if it breaks that, but that could be something if you're looking for a bottom feeder. Still below the value area for the year. Would like to see it ultimately get back above 43, but that's the way that I would play it if you're interested in that name. What else did I have written down here for today? AMD, we went through that one. I can't read my handwriting for some reason, but GE was another standout name today, right? Really nice move, right? Again, broke the 5-period moving average yesterday, started just above the 5-period moving average and right back out to new highs. Another name that I thought was really interesting too was Meta. I mentioned this on Twitter earlier that, the name really didn't have a pullback yesterday. Out of all the the great eight names, or I call them great eight, but magnificent seven names, because I don't understand why they took Netflix out of the like the FANG group, or why it's not included. So I use that in the great eight name. But look at, it really didn't have that much of a pullback yesterday, and worked its way, retested, and kind of broke back into the value area, and continue to trend quite nicely. But really nice price action, I would say, for something like this. And again, the other thing to think about is Meta is a decent weight in the Qs and the S&P. And while all of those names kind of got moved down because they are in the index, Meta didn't really. So that name really kind of stood out to me. Another name that I'm looking at too for an industrial name is this Eaton. Considering what GE is doing, considering that Caterpillar broke out to new highs yesterday, I love this. This is a name that I've owned in the TTG trend for a while, but I'm looking to add it into my trading account, provided that it comes out of this, and it may spend some time consolidating. This is where you have to be patient. For now, I have an alert at 238.23 for the breakout and the next leg up. Just like, if you've paid attention to Darvis, right? The Darvis box, right? The value areas are very similar, waiting for it to get to the next area. And that would be above 238.23. The home builders, right? That's another group. Again, I like to see what some of the best performers have been doing and how they handled a little bit of a pullback. One name that I'm watching in this space is Builder. Notice, you haven't missed anything if you didn't, because I didn't get involved in this one either. But notice how it's putting in this nice consolidation. How many inside? Well, yeah, I guess this is, if you're looking at the bodies of these candles, inside day 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right after this big move. Notice the home builders did this too back. And it's easier to illustrate this with ITB. But remember the first move after the CPI report all the way back in the middle of November, right? You had this big gap up, and then you had a whole bunch of inside days, just consolidating right around the overhead supply, virgin point of control, and then it took off and took a next leg higher. So that's why, in my opinion, it's important to watch, be patient, and wait for that next leg to be activated, because builders putting in an awful lot of inside days here too. And there's nothing to say that these builders can't keep going up here. The trend is really nice there. Two more things to talk about. Kava, which is another name. No, I have no position in this one either, but watching what it does at this virgin point of control takeout right around this 43 level, because it's handling it pretty well, right? Just like we talked about in the ITB and so on and so forth. It's quite natural to see some digestion here. Sometimes what happens too is you see a complete fade and reversal off of a virgin point of control, because the overhead supply, the sellers went out, right? We're not seeing that yet here in Kava, right? So very interesting. Last thing I'm going to talk about is the Chinese internet names. I'm getting a lot of questions because we've seen option activity, right, in a lot of the China names, right? And I think they're definitely something to watch. But keep in mind, if if you do follow option activity, you have to be honest with yourself, right? If you've been following option activity over the last year, you've seen option activity a lot in the Chinese internet names, ASHR, FXI. You've seen a huge amount of bullish option activity. Notice none of it has really worked, other than like a trade that worked for a day or two. I believe I talked about that probably, I don't know, somewhere around 3 or 6 months ago. I tried going long, and I took profits as soon as we saw it move for a couple days, because I knew that we just haven't seen the trend develop here. So same thing with here. So if you're thinking, oh my God, I got to get long the Chinese internet names because they're seeing bullish option activity, use that flow and then use the technicals to help you. So first of all, the first thing to ask, right, is when you see bullish option activity, And then you kind of put it in your system, which I think is the best way to go, because we know that roughly about 50% of the option activity doesn't work, right? It just is what it is, right? Of course, the people who quote option activity will never talk about the losing orders. They just won't ever mention them again, right? So they will retweet the ones that work. It's kind of like the old newsletter system, right? My dad used to receive a newsletter of, recommending 4 or 5 stocks, right? And the newsletter writers would do this. They would send out a different group of stocks to different investors. And the ones that they would write about, then they would go after that group, and they would say, hey, look at the ones that we recommended. It's the same thing that with people who quote option activity. They'll only quote the ones that worked, and then they'll brag about them, right? They'll do victory laps. But the 50% of the ones that don't work, it's like they never happened before and they don't ever bring them up again. All right. So sorry to be brutally honest with you, but it is what it is. So for something like this, right? If you're looking, we've seen a lot of names or so again, this is on my list to watch, and it could be a next year move. Look at how tight the value area is here, right? Watch for a break, I would say, of $30. So again, I'm not trying to time the move from 27 to 30, even though that's a nice percentage move. I would be waiting for this to start to trend, right? Because look at what you don't have to catch the first move. For example, look at a name like a firm, right? Great. If you caught, some people are like, oh my God, I caught this move. Look at what the name did since, right? Look at CrowdStrike this year, right? You didn't have to be the first one in, right? CrowdStrike, some people were like, they caught the move and they're out, right? Off of 2 green bars, right? That was when the stock was at 170, right? I'm still in CrowdStrike, right? The stock's up to 270, right? That's where you make your money. So be patient with these things, right? You can note that there's people are taking speculative option flow, because if it does go, it could catch some momentum, right? STNE is another name, right, that we've been playing in the trading room, right? Don't have to catch the first green candle, right? Look at the move since, right? And sometimes, and I bring up a couple of these names because they based for a long time and then they started to move. And then again, it's so much more than just the first green candle, right? That is the first beginning of the move, of the potential move. So I'll leave it there, guys. Have a great night. See you tomorrow.